I discovered my husband with my son's bride-to-be in our family room just hours before the ceremony. I was ready to confront them when motion in the corridor caught my attention. It was my son, Elijah. His expression was emotionless stone. He met my gaze and murmured, "Mom, I'm already aware, and it's more terrible than you realize. Greetings, everyone. I appreciate you being present with me today. Before beginning my narrative, I'm curious about which city you're watching from. Please share it in the comments section. Now, allow me to draw you into this account. On the dawn of my son's wedding, I awakened at 5 a.m. Sleep eluded me. I convinced myself it was merely anxiety, the variety any mother experiences on such a significant occasion. I sat here in this exact home office, gazing at spreadsheets on my monitor. I operate a modest CPA practice from home, nothing elaborate, but it financed our son Elijah's university education and handled the additional expenses that my husband, Franklin's income didn't quite cover. The figures on the display were indistinct. My thoughts were elsewhere completely. Outside, the atmosphere was still dark and hushed, but I could already envision the scene that would materialize on the terrace of our Atlanta, Georgia property in mere hours. Ivory chairs positioned in flawless columns on the grass. I had devoted the entire spring season nurturing the arch that Franklin had constructed, adorning it with the rose bushes I had cultivated since they were miniature buds. I had verified the string lights 3 separate times myself, ensuring not a solitary bulb had expired. Everything needed to be flawless. Our son, our Elijah, warranted a flawless occasion. 20-5 years of matrimony to Franklin, 23 years nurturing Elijah. I had devoted my complete existence to this household. I had been the reliable hand, the organizer, the individual who recalled dental visits and birthdays, and ensured the expenses were settled promptly. Franklin was the charmer, the soul of the gathering, the person everyone adored. I was the foundation he depended on, and for an extended period, that was sufficient for me. But recently, something had seemed wrong. A quiet distance had established itself between us. It was in the manner he would cease talking when I entered a space, in the way his mobile device was always angled away from me. When I inquired if something was incorrect, he would merely dismiss it. "Just occupation, honey," he'd respond. Significant advancement on the horizon. I selected to accept him. What alternative existed? You don't discard 25 years of history overboard due to an intuition. The sound of the office entrance brought me back to the current moment. It was Elijah positioned there in his sleepwear, a cup of coffee in his grasp. He appeared fatigued with shadowy circles beneath his eyes. At his age, he possessed my pragmatic disposition, but his father's attractive characteristics. "Mon, you've been awake for hours," he stated. "The ceremony isn't until 4 p.m. I simply desire everything to be flawless for my boy," I expressed, attempting a bright smile as I shut my laptop. "Your dad is still resting?" Elijah questioned. "He departed early," Elijah said with an unusual tone in his voice. He walked over and positioned himself on the edge of my workspace, suddenly appearing much younger. He mentioned something about collecting a present for Madison's parents, the Ellingtons. I frowned. That was unfamiliar to me. "Mom," he said, pausing, "can I pose a question to you?" I rotated my chair to face him. Beneath the severe illumination of my desk lamp, his concern was apparent. "What's troubling you, sweetie?" He inhaled deeply. "Do you believe Madison genuinely loves me?" The question struck me like a blow to the stomach. Madison, his fiancée, ambitious, gorgeous, a young architect from a prosperous, established family with connections. On the exterior, she was everything we had perpetually desired for Elijah. But I'd harbored my own uncertainties. I had observed how her eyes would occasionally wander when Elijah discussed his interests, how she examined her mobile device during family meals. "Why would you pose that, honey? It's your wedding occasion, I understand, and perhaps it's just final moment nervousness," he muttered, staring into his coffee. "But occasionally, when she observes me, I sense like she's observing right through me, like I'm just a requirement she needed to fulfill on her path to the ideal existence." He paused. "And recently, she's been investing substantial time with Dad. They're continuously discussing finances, investments. She states he's guiding her." I desired to inform him about the things I had also detected, how Franklin's eyes pursued Madison around the space, how he constantly discovered justifications to assist her with her coat or replenish her beverage, how he knew precisely how she preferred her coffee, to sugars and a portion of milk without needing to inquire. Instead, I extended out and squeezed his hand. "Wedding anxiety is normal, sweetie. Marriage is the largest step you'll ever undertake. It's not just anxiety, Mom, he said, his voice fracturing. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a suffering that frightened me. I believe she's infatuated with someone else. I froze. The blood transformed to ice. What causes you to state that? Minor things, he whispered. The manner she illuminates when Dad contacts, how she constantly inquires about him first when she arrives. I observed them in the garden yesterday, simply conversing, and the manner he observed her wasn't how a father-in-law should observe his son's fiancée. I sensed a flush ascend up my neck. I compelled my voice to remain steady. Elijah, that's a very serious allegation. I comprehend, he said, shrugging. And I hope I'm incorrect. God, I hope I'm incorrect. Before I could respond, the entrance opened again. It was Franklin. He was already attired in an impeccable shirt and dress trousers, appearing immaculate as perpetually. Well, observe, my two beloved people, he exclaimed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He seemed astonished to observe Elijah there. Significant occasion. Son, you should be preparing. He turned his attention to me. And you, Simone, you're going to exhaust yourself. Madison just contacted. She's arriving around 10 o'clock to discuss some final moments seating arrangement particulars. I watched Elijah's expression constrict. What particulars? He inquired. Oh, just ensuring her parents don't sit adjacent to your Uncle James, after that political disagreement last Christmas, Franklin said with a dismissive gesture. You understand how particular her family is. We should discuss it privately due to the politics and all that. Of course, Elijah said, his voice level. We can't have the incorrect people sitting together. The tension in the space was so dense you could slice it with a blade. I watched my husband and my son, and I knew deep in my soul that Elijah wasn't incorrect. Something was terribly, horribly incorrect. After Franklin and Elijah departed my office, a cold dread seized me. I was scheduled to have a final conversation with the caterer at 10:30, a conversation I had been organizing for weeks. I picked up the telephone, my hand trembling slightly, and contacted them. I informed them I had a family crisis and needed to postpone. It was a falsehood. The truth was, I had cleared my complete morning. I couldn't dismiss Elijah's words, nor the sickening sensation that Franklin's false cheer had provoked. Something was transpiring in my residence today, and for the first time in 25 years, I intended to discover what it was. I invested the next 2 hours pretending to be occupied. I organized the kitchen, which was already spotless. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room surface. Every sound made me startle. Every passing automobile made my heart hammer against my ribs. I felt like an actress in a performance executing the role of the joyful mother of the groom, while inside I twisted with anxiety. Precisely at 10 o'clock, a sleek ivory BMW pulled into our driveway. Madison's automobile. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out. Even in simple jeans and a blouse, she appeared like she belonged on a magazine cover. She walked up to the front entrance with the natural confidence of someone who knows she belongs. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I crept out the back entrance and circled the residence. Crouching low behind the large hydrangea bushes that bordered our family room windows, I felt absurd, like a spy in my own residence. But the need to know, the need to confirm my fears or dispel them, was overwhelming. Through the large bay window, I could observe them. Franklin had permitted her in, and they were positioned by the fireplace, the spot where we captured our family pictures every Christmas. He was pouring her a beverage. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language communicated everything. They stood proximate to his hand rested low on her back. It was a casual gesture, one that could be easily explained away. But it lingered there for a moment too long. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails penetrating into my palms. 25 years we had constructed a life in this residence. We had read stories to Elijah on that very sofa. We had hosted countless family gatherings in that space. And now my husband was positioned there caressing another woman, my son's fiancée, on our son's wedding occasion. I was about to stand up, to storm in like a fury, and confront them right then and there. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the ceremony. I only cared about the scorching betrayal I was witnessing. But then, I noticed motion in the upstairs corridor, a shadow in the glass's reflection. I looked closer. It was Elijah. He was positioned at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them too. The sight of him, so still and broken, stopped me cold. This wasn't just my suffering, it was his. Downstairs, Things had escalated. Madison's hand was now on Franklin's chest. She leaned into him, her head tilted back, a smile playing on her lips. She stated something and he laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Light, genuine, joyful, the way he used to laugh with me when we were young, and everything seemed possible. In that moment, I observed my husband, transformed into someone I didn't recognize, someone alive in a manner he hadn't been with me for an extended time. Then his hands were in her hair, and they were kissing. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind you observe in movies. My vision went crimson. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the residence, ready to rip the entrance from its hinges, ready to scream until my lungs gave out, and then a hand gripped my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Elijah. He had slipped out of the residence and come to find me. His face was pale, ashen, but his eyes burned with a cold, hard determination I had never observed before. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice strained. "Not yet, Elijah. This is ... I choked on the words. I couldn't even articulate it. "I comprehend what it is," he said. His voice was steady, though I could observe his hands trembling. "Mom, I've known for weeks." The word emerged as a strangled whisper. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, who now looked at me with the eyes of a man who had observed too much. We were still crouched behind the hydrangeas. The beautiful flowers I'd been so proud of were now serving as a hiding place for the destruction of our family. Inside the residence, my husband and my son's fiancée had moved from the fireplace to the sofa. I couldn't bear to observe. I didn't desire to accept it at first, Elijah said, his voice low and urgent. I kept fabricating excuses for them. "He's just being kind. She's just nervous about joining the family." But it kept transpiring, the lingering looks, the private conversations, the manner she lit up whenever he was near. He corrected himself. The slip-up was a painful reminder of a life that no longer existed. She was supposed to be acquiring a new mother figure, not a rival. "I mean, Madison, why didn't you inform me?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of shock and a strange protective rage. "You shouldn't have had to carry this alone." "Because I needed proof," he said, his jaw clenched. He looked at me, his eyes much older than his 23 years. I desired to give them enough rope to hang themselves. He pulled out his mobile device. His hands shook slightly as he tapped the display. "I hired someone," he confessed. "What did you do?" "What? I'm not foolish, Mom. After I observed them having lunch together a month ago, lunch Dad informed me was a business meeting, and she informed me was an afternoon shopping with her girlfriends. I knew I wasn't delusional. I needed to know the truth." He handed me the device. "I hired a private investigator." My breath hitched. "A detective, Elijah. The funds." "Don't concern yourself about the funds," he said grimly. "It was worth every single cent." The first photograph on the display showed Franklin and Madison walking into the St. Regis Atlanta downtown. The timestamp indicated it was 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday afternoon, when Franklin was supposedly at a regional sales conference. The second photograph showed them departing together 2 hours later, appearing heated and disheveled. "There are 17 different occasions," Elijah said quietly, as I scrolled through a gallery of betrayal. Photographs of them in dimly lit restaurants across the metropolis. Photographs of them pressed up against Franklin's automobile in a private parking area. Photographs of them laughing, holding hands, living a completely different life behind our backs. I felt sick. The sheer magnitude of the deceit was breathtaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a calculated, long-term affair. I stood up again. A fresh wave of rage washed over me. "We're stopping this," I said, my voice like steel. "Right now." "No." Elijah's voice was sharp, making me crouch down again. "Mom, trust me. I have a plan." "A plan?" "Elijah, this is insane. We can't just permit the ceremony." "Absolutely we can," he cut in, his voice ringing with an authority I'd never heard from him before. "And we will." "Mom, consider it. If we confront them now, what transpires? They'll deny it. They'll twist it. Dad will state you're being hysterical, that you're misunderstanding things. Madison will cry and play the victim. They'll turn it all back on us." He was correct. I could already hear Franklin's smooth, placating voice. "Simone, you're overreacting. She's a nervous young woman, and I was just offering paternal advice. So what do you suggest?" I whispered, my anger giving way to a cold, terrifying clarity. Elijah's smile was something chilling and unfamiliar. "Public humiliation," he said. the words hanging in the atmosphere between us. Total and absolute destruction of their reputations. Legal consequences. We don't just end this, Mom. We make sure they can never do this to anyone again. I looked at my son. When had he become so calculating, so ruthless? Then, I looked back through the window. I observed my husband, the man I had loved and trusted for a quarter of a century, start to unbutton Madison's blouse on the sofa where we had built our family. And in that moment, I knew the woman I used to be, the understanding, forgiving wife, was gone. She had died right there in the dirt behind the flowers I had so painstakingly planted. Tell me the plan, I said. That evening was one of the strangest of my life. Franklin came home acting as if nothing had transpired, inquiring about final catering arrangements. Madison had departed hours before, and he was the picture of the loving husband and proud father. He discussed his speech for the reception, about how proud he was of Elijah. The hypocrisy was so dense I could barely breathe. I just acknowledged and smiled, an empty shell of myself, while inside I screamed. After Franklin went to bed, Elijah and I met in my home office. The entrance was locked, the blinds drawn. It felt like a war room, and in many ways, it was. On my desk lay the beginnings of a file of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Tell me about that, detective, I said, studying a surveillance photograph that turned my stomach. Her name is Aisha, Elijah said. Aisha Whitfield. The name struck me like a splash of cold water. Aisha, my sister. Aisha. Elijah acknowledged. I didn't know who else to contact. I knew she was a cop for 20 years before retiring and starting her own PI agency. I knew she was intelligent and she'd be discreet. He looked a little sheepish. I also knew she never really appreciated Dad. I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a sob. My younger sister Aisha, we were close, but I hadn't informed her about the growing distance with Franklin. I had been too proud, too ashamed to admit my marriage might be failing. I'll contact her, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Aisha answered on the second ring. Simone, it's past midnight. Is everything acceptable? No, Aisha, nothing is acceptable. And then the dam broke. I informed her everything what Elijah suspected, what we had witnessed that morning, the photographs. I cried ugly, choked sobs for the first time all day. She listened patiently, her voice calm and firm on the other end of the line. There was no shock or surprise, just a grim acceptance. I'm not surprised, Simone, she said quietly when I finished. I've observed the manner he looks at that girl. I was hoping I was incorrect. Elijah informed me about the photographs, I said, wiping my eyes. What else do you have? More than you probably desire to know. Her voice turned professional. I've been tracking their movements for 3 weeks. They meet twice a week like clockwork at the St. Regis Atlanta. He always pays in cash. They consume lunch at fancy restaurants he'd never take you to. Last week, he took her to Cartier. I felt that flash of rage again. Our funds, the funds I managed so carefully, the funds that were supposed to be for our retirement, for our future. And Simone, Aisha's voice was soft. There's more now. Something bigger. I've been investigating Franklin's financials, attempting to figure out where all this cash for the hotel rooms and presents is originating from. He's been sloppy. What did you discover? I asked, dreading the answer. There was a long pause on the line. It's not just Madison, she said, her voice heavy. It's not the first time. I discovered a series of regular monthly payments going back 15 years, always to the same persona woman named Nicole Jenkins. The name meant nothing to me. Who is she? I did some investigating. She was a junior associate at his old firm when Elijah was a child. She departed abruptly about 15 years ago. The payments started a few months after she departed. Aisha took a deep breath. Simone, she has a daughter, a 15-year-old girl named Zoe. I ran a background check. The father isn't listed on the birth certificate, but I'd bet my license that Franklin is her father. The telephone felt heavy in my hand. I couldn't breathe. A daughter, an entire other child, 15 years of lies, 15 years of a double life, the secret trips, the inexplicable expenses, the emotional distance, it all clicked into horrible clarity. I have to know for certain, Aisha, I whispered. I know, she said. I'll handle it. But Simone, you have to be prepared. When this drops, it's going to be a nuclear bomb. I know, I said, my voice cold and hard. That's precisely what we're counting on. The 24 hours leading up to the ceremony were a blur of calculated deception. I moved through the preparations like a ghost, my body on autopilot while my mind raced. I smiled at relatives. I approved the final table settings with the wedding planner. I even assisted Franklin with his tie, my fingers brushing the silk fabric as I imagined tightening it around his neck. Every interaction was a performance, every polite word a lie. Aisha worked quickly. She was a professional, and this was now personal. She informed me she had a contact at a private lab. It's risky, Simone, but if we can acquire a clean DNA sample from Franklin, we can obtain a non-legal preliminary comparison to a sample from the girl. That night, after Franklin fell asleep, snoring softly beside me in the bed we had shared for a quarter century, I crept out of the room. My heart pounded with every creak of the floorboard. I went to the bathroom and took his toothbrush from its holder. My hand shook so badly, I almost dropped it. It felt like the ultimate violation. But what was this compared to the violations he had committed against me, against our family? I carefully tucked it into a plastic container and left it in the mailbox for Aisha to collect before dawn. The next day, as the residence buzzed with the chaotic energy of florists and photographers, Aisha contacted. "I've obtained more on the funds," she said, her voice grim. "It's worse than we thought." We met in my automobile, parked on the street, away from the residence, the only place I felt secure to talk. She opened a laptop and turned it toward me. On the display was a spreadsheet, a dizzying array of numbers and dates. "I did a full analysis of your joint accounts, your retirement funds, everything," she said, pointing to a highlighted column. "Observe the pattern. For years, Franklin has been making regular cash withdrawals, small amounts, $500 here, $700 there, never more than $1,000 at a time, always from different branches. I thought it was for his hobby," I said, stunned. "He always informed me he was investing in rare coins, something that required cash transactions." Another lie. "His hobby was named Madison," Aisha said dryly. "The cash for the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the presents, that Cartier necklace, he paid for half of it in cash. But that's not the worst part." She clicked another tab. "He's been taking loans out against your pension plan." I stared at the display. There it was in black and white, a series of loans, taken out against the retirement account I had so diligently contributed to from my small business, the account that was supposed to be our safety net, our security for old age. He had drained almost $60,000 in the last 18 months. "How?" I whispered. "He would have needed my signature. He forged it," Aisha said quietly. "I compared the signature on the loan documents to your signature on your tax returns. It's a good forgery, but it's not yours." A wave of nausea struck me. This was beyond deceit. This was theft. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was systematically dismantling our future piece by piece to fund his sordid affair. He was robbing me of the college fund we had built, of the life we were supposed to share. He was gambling with my entire future. "And Madison?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She's not an innocent victim," Aisha said, her gaze hard. "I'll get to her, but first there's something else." She hesitated. Then she handed me a large manila envelope. "The preliminary DNA results came in this morning." My hands began to shake as I opened it. I scanned the page. The scientific jargon blurred until I found the conclusion at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. I stared at the words until they were burned into my memory. Zoe Jenkins was Franklin's daughter. 15 years. 15 years of loving him, trusting him, building a life with him while he had another daughter, another family hidden in the shadows. I rested my head on the steering wheel, the cool leather against my hot forehead. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange, terrifying calm came over me. The suffering was still there, massive gaping wound in my chest. But now it was accompanied by something else, a cold, hard resolve. He wasn't just going to lose his wife, he was going to lose everything. Sitting in the automobile with my sister, that flimsy piece of paper in my hand felt heavier than a tombstone. It was the death certificate of my marriage, of the life I thought I had. A 15-year-old daughter. The words echoed in the silent automobile. How did you discover her?" I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. Aisha's expression was a mixture of pity and professional resolve. "It started with the payments. Once I had Nicole Jenkins's name, it wasn't difficult to locate her. She lives just 2 towns over, about 20 miles away." For 15 years, he had been living a secret life a short drive away. How many times had he informed me he was working late? How many business dinners had he attended? How many weekend golf trips had he taken? My mind spun as I mentally reviewed years of excuses and lies, each one now taking on a new, sinister meaning. I swung by the residence yesterday morning, Aisha continued, her voice soft. I posed as a market researcher. Nicole opened the entrance, and behind her I observed the girl Zoe. She's the spitting image of him, the same dark, intelligent eyes that first drew me to him all those years ago, the same smile. She's unmistakable. I imagined it an innocent teenager in all this, who looked just like my husband, a sister my son never knew he had. The thought was so surreal, so monstrous, that I couldn't fully process it. My family wasn't just broken, it was a fraught, carefully constructed lie that I had unknowingly helped maintain for more than half my life. Does the mother Nicole know about me, about Elijah? I asked. I can't state for certain, Aisha admitted, but the manor she lives a nice residence and a good school district, but no flashy careerites. Claire Franklin is her primary source of financial support. She has every reason to keep things quiet. He wasn't just paying child support, Simone, he was funding her whole life with my funds, with our funds, my consulting funds, our joint savings, the funds he stole from our retirement. The betrayal was so deep, so layered, I felt like I was drowning. It was a systematic plunder of my life's work, my trust, and my future. I handed the DNA report back to Aisha. Put it with the rest of the evidence, I said. My voice, stripped of emotion, was numb. The shock was so profound it had short-circuited my ability to sense anything but a cold, heavy emptiness. I thought about that girl, Zoe. What kind of man informs his daughter? He can't acknowledge her. What kind of man raises one son in the light while keeping another child hidden in the dark? The cruelty not just to me and Elijah, but to this innocent girl was astonishing. And what about Madison? I asked, needing to shift my focus to latch onto a target for the anger that was starting to melt the ice in my veins. You stated there was more on her. Aisha acknowledged, her expression hardening again. Right, Madison, let's discuss the fiancé. She turned the laptop back to me and opened a new file. She's not just sleeping with your husband. She's been embezzling funds from her law firm. The words took a moment to register. She's a junior partner at a prestigious downtown firm, Aisha explained, displaying documents that looked like internal financial reports. She's been inflating expense reports, creating fake invoices for non-existent consultants, and siphoning the funds into a private bank account. They aren't large amounts each time, but it's steady. In the last year, she's stolen over $200,000. I gasped. $200. And I can trace some of that funds directly to Presents for Franklin, Aisha said, showing me a bank transfer, followed by a credit card statement that showed the purchase of a $1,000 watch. She was stealing from her partners to buy presents for her lover, who was stealing from his wife to buy presents for her. It's the most perfectly disgusting circle of deceit I've ever observed. So Madison wasn't just a home, she was a criminal, a thief, and she was about to marry my son, bringing her corruption and lies into the heart of what was left of my family. The numbness in my chest vanished, replaced by a white-hot fury. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about protecting my son. This was about justice. This was about making sure these two people faced the consequences for every lie, every dollar, every broken promise. Okay, I said, looking my sister in the eye. The ceremony plan. Let's go over it one more time. I desire it to be flawless. The knowledge of Madison's embezzlement added a dark, criminal layer to the already stunning betrayal. It changed everything. This was no longer just a messy, heartbreaking domestic drama. It was a conspiracy of fraud and theft perpetrated by the two people who should have been closest to us. How did you acquire all this? I asked Aisha, pointing to the damning financial documents on her laptop display. We were still in my automobile, the atmosphere thick with the smell of conspiracy and stale coffee. Madison isn't as intelligent as she thinks, Aisha said with grim satisfaction. She got careless. And I have companions on the police force who were willing to pull some strings when they heard the account. A buddy of mine on the economic crimes unit took one look at these patterns and knew precisely what he was observing. She pointed to the display. She was moving the funds through a shell corporation she set up using her mother's maiden name. It was amateur. I thought of Madison's parents, the Ellingtons. They were pillars of the community. Her father was a respected federal judge. Her mother was on the board of 3 different charities. They moved in circles where reputation was everything. They believed their daughter was a shining star on the rise, marrying into a good, stable family. They had no idea their golden girl was a thief, and the stable family she was marrying into was a house of cards built on lies. The public humiliation was going to destroy them too. For a fleeting instant, I felt a pang of pity for them. They were innocent collateral damage. But that sensation was quickly extinguished by the fire of my own betrayal. So Franklin is stealing our retirement funds to buy presents for his mistress. I summarized, the words tasting like venom. And Madison is stealing from her firm to buy presents for my husband, her lover, who is also her future father-in-law. I shook my head in disbelief. This is movie stuff. It gets better, Aisha said, a wry twist to her lips. Some of the funds Franklin took out of your pension plan. He invested in a sure-thing real estate deal Madison recommended to him. Let me guess, I said, my voice dripping sarcasm. The deal fell through. The deal never existed, Aisha confirmed. The funds went straight into that secret account of hers. She was stealing from him too. He was so blinded by his own ego and infatuation that he never even observed it. I had to laugh. It was a bitter, joyless sound. My brilliant, charming husband, the man who always thought he was the smartest person in the space, was being conned by a 20-something embezzler. It was almost poetic. We spent another hour going over the evidence Aisha had collected. She had everything: bank statements, surveillance photographs, cash-paid hotel receipts, forged loan documents, and now a full criminal file on Madison's activities that was ready to be handed to the prosecutor. And of course, the DNA report, the irrefutable proof that cemented 15 years of deceit. I looked at the file, the neat tabs and organized pages that represented the complete demolition of my life. 25 years of marriage reduced to a stack of incriminating documents on the passenger seat of my automobile. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion washed over me so deep it felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. Aisha, can we do this? I whispered. Can we genuinely stand up in front of 300 people and do this to our family? Aisha reached over and put her hand on my arm. Her grip was firm, reassuring. Simone, listen to me, she said, her voice serious. What other option do you have? If you confront them in private, they will lie. They will manipulate you. They will turn Elijah against you. They will deny until you start thinking you're the delusional one. I've observed it 100 times. She was correct. I knew she was correct. Franklin was a master of manipulation. He could charm his way out of anything. This way, she continued, there is no escape. There is no room for lies. There is only the truth presented in front of everyone they tried to impress. This isn't just about revenge, Simone, it's about consequences. Madison has to face jail time. Franklin has to be held accountable, not just for the cheating, but for the financial fraud he committed against you. This is the only way to make sure the lies stop forever. I took a deep breath, the stale atmosphere of the automobile filling my lungs. I thought of Elijah, his pale, determined face. I thought of Zoe, the daughter I never knew. I thought of the 25 years I had given to a man who had been lying to me since the beginning. You're correct, I said, my voice clear and firm again. It's the only way. I started the automobile. Let's go. We have a ceremony to prepare for. The final hours before the ceremony were the most surreal of my life. I went home and resumed my role as the calm, joyful mother of the groom. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a film of my own existence. I observed myself laughing with my cousins, complimenting my sister-in-law's dress, and assuring the caterer that everything looked wonderful. Inside, I was a coil of tension and grief, but outside the picture of maternal pride, Franklin was in his element, socializing with the early arriving guests, accepting congratulations with a wide, confident smile. He pulled me aside at one point, his arm around my waist. "You look gorgeous, Simone," he said, his voice a low murmur in my ear. "Isn't it a flawless occasion?" I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man I had loved for more than half my life, and felt nothing but cold, desolate emptiness. "Flawless occasion," I smiled back. My son Elijah was a mirror of my own forced composure. He greeted his companions, posed for photographs with his groomsmen, and played his part perfectly. But every time his eyes met mine across the crowded lawn, I could observe the same steel resolve reflected there. We were in this together. We were soldiers waiting for the signal to strike. The plan was simple, and Aisha had rehearsed it with us until we knew it by heart. She had arrived early, disguised as a member of the catering staff. Her professional audiovisual equipment was hidden in plain sight. She had connected her laptop to the large projection display we had rented, supposedly for a sentimental slideshow of Elijah's baby pictures. Nobody suspected a thing. She had a small remote control in her pocket. When the time came, all she had to do was push a single button. I had my own role to play. I had prepared the divorce papers with my attorney a week prior, a fact I had kept secret, even from Elijah. They were signed and notarized in a sealed envelope in my clutch purse. I also had a flash drive with copies of every piece of evidence Aisha had gathered. One way or another, my marriage would officially end today. There was no going back. I wasn't just planning a confrontation. I was planning the first day of the rest of my life. At 4:05, I took my seat in the front row. The string quartet began to play, and the wedding party made their entrance. Franklin sat beside me, squeezing my hand with what appeared to be genuine affection. I felt a tremor of revulsion but forced myself not to pull away. Madison appeared at the end of the aisle, vision in white lace. She looked radiant, gorgeous, and utterly fraudulent. She smiled at the crowd. Then her eyes found Franklin in the front row. For a split second, a look passed between them, a look of shared secrets, of triumphant conspiracy. They thought they had won. They thought they were just minutes away from cementing their perfect, deceptive future. Elijah stood at the altar, his face an unreadable mask. When Madison joined him, he took her hand. His expression never wavered. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning the faces until they landed on mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The officiant began the ceremony with the usual words about love, commitment, and fidelity. The irony was so dense it was nearly suffocating. I wondered if Franklin and Madison were even listening, or if they were already planning their next secret rendezvous. The ceremony continued. They exchanged vows they didn't mean, promises they had already broken 100 times. My stomach churned with every lie that departed their lips. Finally, the officiant reached the critical moment. He smiled benevolently at the crowd. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. A silence fell over the 300 guests. This was the moment. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Then I stood up. The moment I arose, a collective gasp ran through the 300 guests. The atmosphere, which had been filled with the soft melodies of the string quartet and the warm afternoon breeze, suddenly became thick and silent. All heads in the garden turned toward me. I could sense their confusion, their shock, their curiosity like a physical force. Franklin, sitting next to me, went rigid. "Simone, what are you doing?" he hissed, his hand grabbing my arm. "Sit down. You're making a scene." I shook his hand off as if it were a venomous snake. I looked past him, my eyes fixed on my son Elijah, who stood at the altar, his face pale but resolute. He knew this was coming. We had planned it. Then I looked at Madison, whose radiant smile had frozen into a mask of confused horror. "I apologize, everyone," I said, my voice clear and surprisingly steady. It carried across the silent garden. "I apologize for the interruption. But I believe the officiant asked if there was any reason this marriage should not proceed." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "And yes, I do. I have a reason." A wave of murmuring swept through the crowd. I observed Madison's father, Judge Ellington, begin to rise from his seat, an expression of thunderous indignation on his face. "Mrs. Whitfield, what is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "The meaning, Judge Ellington," I said, turning to face him, "is that your daughter is about to marry my son under false pretenses. And I believe you and everyone else gathered here today deserve to know the truth." I pulled the small remote control from my purse. It was the one Aisha had given me. My thumb hovered over the single crimson button. "The truth," Franklin sputtered, his face flushing crimson. "Simone, you've lost your mind. You're embarrassing our son." "Am I, Franklin?" I asked calmly, turning my gaze back to him, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "You're the one who has embarrassed our son. You and your mistress." With that, I pressed the button. Behind the altar, the large display that was supposed to show a slideshow of Elijah's baby photographs sprang to life. The first image that appeared was a crisp surveillance photograph of Franklin and Madison locked in that passionate kiss in our family room, the one Elijah and I had witnessed just the day before. The crowd erupted. There were screams, gasps, people standing up to get a better look. I observed Madison's mother bring a hand to her chest, her face ashen, But that's not all, I continued, my voice somehow rising above the chaos. You see, this wasn't just a one-time mistake. This has been transpiring for months. The display changed. A new photograph appeared, Franklin and Madison entering the St. Regis Atlanta, the timestamp clearly visible. Then another and another, a collage of their secret meetings, their clandestine lunches, their lies, exposed for all to observe. Madison stammered, attempting to deny it, but her voice was lost in the uproar. Franklin was standing, shouting, "This is fake. Those are photo montages. Simone is having a nervous breakdown." "Am I, Franklin?" I asked quietly. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The display changed again. This time it displayed bank statements. My finger on a close-up photograph pointed out the suspicious cash withdrawals, the forged signatures on the pension plan loan documents. A Cartier receipt for a $15,000 necklace flashed on the display, followed by a photograph of Madison wearing that same necklace at her bachelorette party. The noise from the crowd began to diminish, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. This was no longer just a cheating scandal. It was something darker. My husband has been systematically stealing from our family's retirement savings to fund his affair, I announced, and his fiancée, the woman about to marry my son, has also been occupied. The next slide showed the evidence of Madison's embezzlement from her law firm, the fake invoices, the bank transfers. I could observe her partners in the fourth row, their faces shifting from confusion to pure fury. And then I delivered the final devastating blow. "But the best part," I said, my voice turning to ice, "the true heart of the deceit that has defined my marriage is that my husband's lies didn't start with Madison." The DNA test results filled the display. The words, "probability of paternity, 99.999%, were displayed in huge bold letters. Below, there was a photograph of a pretty, smiling 15-year-old girl. "This is Zoe Jenkins," I said, my voice trembling with 15 years of repressed suffering. "She is Franklin's daughter he has kept hidden from me and his own son for her entire life." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people staring at the evidence of a betrayal so complete, so devastating that even the most seasoned gossips were left speechless. And in that perfect, terrible silence, I watched the world I had known for 25 years burn to the ground. The silence was broken by a single sharp sob. It came from Madison, who staggered, her face a ghastly white against the pure white of her wedding dress. Then she collapsed onto the ground in a heap of lace and shattered dreams. That single sound broke the spell. The garden erupted into chaos. People were yelling, pointing, pulling out their devices to record the disaster. Madison's mother ran toward her fallen daughter, while her father, the judge, stood there, his face a mask of disbelief and utter humiliation. Franklin froze for a moment, his face a kaleidoscope of rage, panic, and mounting horror. He looked from the display to me, to the stunned faces of his companions and colleagues. He was trapped. There were no lies, no smooth words that could talk his way out of this. His carefully constructed world had been publicly and irrevocably demolished. Then he did the only thing a coward could do. He ran, he bolted, shoving his way through the stunned crowd, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses as he scrambled toward the parking area. He was literally attempting to flee the scene of his own life's implosion. But Aisha was waiting for him. My sister, still in her catering uniform, stepped out from behind a large oak tree bordering our property. She was a petite woman, but she moved with the confidence of a seasoned police officer. As Franklin ran past, she put out her foot. It was a perfectly executed trip. Franklin fell hard, hitting the manicured lawn and sliding for a few feet in his expensive wedding suit. "Going somewhere, Franklin?" Aisha asked casually, walking over to where he lay sprawled and gasping. By then, Elijah had left the altar and was beside me. He put a firm arm around me. Madison was back on her feet, supported by her sobbing mother, and pointed a shaking finger at me. You planned this," she shrieked, her voice high with hysteria. "You planned this whole thing to ruin my life." "No, Madison," Elijah said, his voice cold and clear, cutting through her hysterics. "You ruined your own life. You and him." He gestured toward his father, who was now being helped up by Aisha. "Let go of me," Franklin demanded, attempting to pull his arm free from my sister's firm grasp. "Can't do that, Frankie," Aisha said, using a childhood nickname that made him flinch. "You see, I'm a licensed private investigator, and I have reason to believe you have committed multiple felonies, including financial fraud. But don't worry, we're not here to discuss you right now." She looked over her shoulder. My business is with her. Two uniformed police officers were walking calmly through the parting crowd. They weren't here for Franklin's fraud. That would be a civil matter for my lawyer to handle. They were here for Madison. Madison Ellington, one of the officers asked, his voice quiet but authoritative. Madison's eyes went wide with terror. No, she whispered. You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud. The officer continued as his partner took her arms and gently applied the handcuffs. The click of the cuffs closing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I observed Madison's face crumble as the realization struck her that this was not just public humiliation. This was not just a cancelled ceremony. This was real. There were going to be real legal consequences. Her existence, as she knew it, was overdought. As the police led a sobbing Madison away, her parents watched in stunned horror. The photographers who had been hired to capture a fairy tale were now capturing the fall of a prominent family, their flashes popping relentlessly. The crowd began to disperse. Some departed quickly, not wanting to be a part of the disaster. Others lingered, whispering in shocked huddles, their devices still held high, recording everything. In the midst of the chaos, I finally felt my strength leave me. Elijah held me. It's over, Mom, he whispered. It's finally over. I looked around at the ruins of the flawless occasion I had planned. It was a mess. It was a nightmare. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. If you're still listening, would you do me a huge favor and hit the like button on this video and comment the number 1 below? It lets me know you've supported me and tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement to me. Please comment the number 1 and let me tell you what transpired next. The 3 hours that followed the explosion were a blur of flashing blue light, hushed conversations, and the slow, painful process of dismantling a ceremony that never was. The police took our statements. Madison was driven away in a patrol automobile, her gorgeous wedding dress looking absurd and tragic in the harsh glare of the setting sun. Franklin, after being questioned and released, simply disappeared. He got into his automobile and drove away without a word to me or his son. The next few weeks were a painful, messy ordeal. The account, as expected, became a local media sensation. Scandal on wedding day. Fiancé arrested at altar. Groom's father implicated in decades of deceit. Our names and faces were everywhere. I stopped answering the telephone. I stopped departing the residence unless absolutely necessary. My small CPA firm suffered. Some longtime clients quietly took their business elsewhere, uncomfortable with the notoriety. The day after the ceremony, I did precisely what I had planned. I walked into my lawyer's office, my purse containing the signed divorce papers and the flash drive of evidence. And I filed. With the mountain of proof we had, Franklin didn't even attempt to fight. The legal process was swift and brutal. In the settlement, I acquired the residence and a significant portion of his remaining assets as compensation for the fraud he had committed against our retirement funds. It wasn't a victory. It was restitution. Madison, facing overwhelming evidence, took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 2 years in a low-security prison and ordered to pay back every last cent she had stolen. Her family's reputation was shredded. Franklin's fall was quieter but no less complete. He lost his job, his reputation, and the respect of everyone he knew. He moved into a small apartment across town, and from what I heard, he rarely showed his face in public. But the most complicated part of the aftermath was Zoe. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I received a letter. It was from Nicole Jenkins, Zoe's mother. It was short and to the point. She apologized for the suffering her past relationship with Franklin had caused and stated her daughter, Zoe, had learned the truth from the news and wanted to meet Elijah and me. I sat with that letter for 3 days. What was I supposed to do? This girl was the living embodiment of my husband's biggest betrayal, but she was also an innocent. She hadn't asked for any of this. She was my son's sister. I showed the letter to Elijah. He read it, his face grim. I want to meet her, he said immediately. She's my sister, Mom. She deserves to know her family, or what's left of it. So I made the contact. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in a town halfway between ours. I was terrified. As we waited for them to arrive, I twisted the napkin in my hands until it was a frayed mess. Then they walked in. Nicole was an ordinary, tired-looking woman who seemed to carry the weight of her secrets in the slump of her shoulders, and behind her was Zoe. The moment I observed her, my breath caught. Aisha was correct. She had Franklin's eyes, the same dark, intelligent eyes that had made me fall for him all those years ago. She looked frightened and uncertain, clutching a book to her chest like a shield, and in that moment, looking at this innocent girl who was a victim in all of this, I knew my anger was not with her. It was with him, always him. That first meeting with Zoe was awkward. Words felt clumsy and inadequate. Elijah, bless his heart, did most of the talking. He asked her about high school, about the book she was holding, about her existence. He didn't ask about Franklin. He simply treated her like a person, like a sister he was meeting for the first time. For the most part, just watched, attempting to reconcile the image of this shy, sweet girl with the monumental lies she represented. Slowly, tentatively, we began to build something new. We met again for coffee, then lunch. Elijah and Zoe started texting, discovering a shared love for old movies and spicy cuisine. I found myself looking forward to observing her, hearing about her existence. She was bright, funny, and kind. She was an innocent soul caught in the wreckage caused by our parents. A year passed, existence settled into a new, unfamiliar rhythm. The divorce was finalized. The media storm subsided, replaced by newer, fresher scandals. I poured my energy into rebuilding my business, and slowly my clients started to return. I sold the large family residence with its yard full of ghosts, and bought a smaller, more manageable townhome for myself. It was quiet, peaceful, and it was mine. Elijah, after months of therapy to work through the trauma of the betrayal, was thriving. He had departed his corporate job and gone back to school to pursue his true passion, landscape architecture. He was designing gorgeous spaces, creating order and beauty out of dirt and stone, a fitting metaphor for what he was doing with his own existence. He was dating a lovely young woman, a kind, genuine librarian who looked at him like he was the only person in the world. And Zoe had become a part of our existences. She came over for dinner every other Sunday. She and Elijah had developed a real sibling bond, teasing each other and talking for hours. I found myself sensing a fierce, protective love for her. She was no longer a symbol of betrayal. She was just Zoe, my son's sister, and, in a strange way, a part of my family. One evening, about a year after the ceremony I was sitting in the living room of my new residence when the doorbell rang. It was Franklin. I hadn't observed or spoken to him since the day he fled our ruined reception. He looked diminished, older, grayer, the confident arrogance gone, replaced by a deep wariness. He asked if he could come in. I hesitated. Then I stood aside. He informed me he was in therapy. He stated he was attempting to understand why he had done the things he had done. He apologized. He stated he was sorry for the lies, for the betrayal, for the suffering he had caused me, Elijah, and Zoe. I listened, and I knew he meant it. But an apology couldn't erase 25 years of deceit. I forgive you, Franklin, I said, and I was surprised to find I actually meant it. Not for you, but for me. I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. I looked him in the eye. But I will never trust you again. We can never go back. He acknowledged, a sheen of tears in his eyes. I know, he whispered, and then he departed. That night, as I got ready for bed, I found myself thinking about the woman I was a year ago, crouched in the dirt behind the hydrangeas. She was so broken, so lost. I wished I could go back and inform her that everything would be acceptable, that the suffering wasn't the end of the account. The family I thought I had was a lie. It shattered into a million pieces on that sunny afternoon. But what Elijah, Zoe, and I built in its place was smaller, quieter, and imperfect. But it was honest. It wasn't built on comfortable lies, but on a difficult, painful, and ultimately freeing truth. We had lost everything. But in doing so, we had found something real. And for the first time in a long, long time, that felt like enough. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my account. If you've been through something similar, or if any part of this has resonated with you, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your accounts matter. And if you'd like to hear more, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Be kind to yourselves, and I'll see you next time.